Everybody, and welcome to Skewed and Reviewed. Our latest Skewedcast is here. I am Gareth, creator of Skewed and Reviewed. I am joined, as always, with Justin and Michael, and you can catch us on our site at sknr.net. You can also catch our content on panelcentral.com, keyword skewed, which are the 8 newspapers that we contribute to. We've got our new magazine. The current issue is in final layout right now and should be ready very soon with the cover stories on Borderlands 3 and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And of course, you can catch my segment each week on BJ Shea's Geek Nation on KISW FM radio. And we offer the simulcast on the site, so very easy to find, or you can just go to KISW.com and follow the show links in. So this week, we are going to be discussing some video games, some hardware news. We got some really good franchise news. And then we're going to have a discussion about some of the big cons coming up, including San Diego Comic-Con, the D23 Expo from Disney, and some news about Star Wars Celebration 2020. So I wanted to start off, though, with the DVD that just arrived the other day. I'm in the process of getting ready to do the full review on it. But we have here Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is a brand new film from DC's animated movie studio. And of course, as you can guess, it is a crossover because you have Batman and the classic Batman characters meeting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So we've got a lot of very good footage in terms of behind the scene. Like, for example, they have a special called Cowabunga Batman When Comic Book Worlds Collide. There's a fight night in Gotham, a sneak peek at DC Universe's next animated film, Batman Hush, which has also been moved up a week from its original date. And this, of course, is the 4K version here. You got the 4K, Ultra HD, the Blu-ray, the digital, and a really good picture and sound quality. So we'll have a full review of that very soon. It is available right now from where you get your DVDs. So, guys, before we swing into some of the big topics of the day, let us talk about some news that's come out about the PlayStation 5. So, Justin, why don't you start us off, please, and tell us what about this new rumor that we've heard coming out?
Yeah, so the new rumor is that there's some sort of hardware within the PlayStation 5 that basically ensures that games will be uninterrupted. So I guess this means that there will be no loading screens. This is one of these rumors that you kind of have to take with a grain of salt because, as you know, this type of hardware gets very complicated. The hardware isn't everything. A lot of this really kind of comes down to how a game is coded, what kind of game it is. We have seen some very impressive games already, with no loading screens. One of the ones that comes to mind is the new God of War. There's virtually no loading screens in that game. So this is something that's technically possible now on current hardware. But I think it really does come down to the type of game it is. It's going to come down to the optimization of the hardware and how a developer utilizes the hardware for their type of game. I mean, I still imagine there's probably going to be some games with loading screens. I might be eating my words. They might have some sort of technology that absolutely ensures there will be no loading screens. That is possible, but I do remain a little bit skeptical about this just because there are certain types of games that I think will just always have loading screens from certain developers, just the way that they code, the way that their engines work. And, I can still imagine like some open world games that have absolutely massive maps and massive assets still having loading screens of some kind. But, I do think that the technology is certainly going to get better in the PlayStation 5. There's probably going to be fewer games with loading screens because, again, as the point I made earlier, there are games already with no loading screens. The Resident Evil 2 remake is also another example that just came into my mind right now. Not a single loading screen in that game. It's absolutely incredible. Again, very small map, but it is still very impressive with the visual fidelity of that game. So it's something that's possible now, and I'm eagerly awaiting hearing some more. But we're still kind of at the phase where we're basically just hearing rumors. Sony has come out and said some official things about what they're planning for the PlayStation 5, but until we actually get like a full official unveiling. I think we'll probably be still in this speculation phase where we'll probably hear some more rumors like this in the future.
And Michael, your take on that, please.
Yeah, so I pretty much echo what Justin was saying. I mean, it's going to deal a lot with development support. Obviously, with an SSD, the load screens are going to be faster. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. Gameplay in general will feel smoother with the SSD versus a traditional hard drive. But again, I think it's going to be up to developer support to implement this. For those who remember, I think it was Xbox 360 with Halo 2, which implemented the you can start playing it while it's still loading thing. And I know that wasn't utilized by a lot of developers either, but it did allow you to start the install. You're about halfway through the installation, and you could actually start the game and play it while it was finishing. So there are a lot of these things going around. Kind of to Justin's point, there are a number of games that already don't have load screens and haven't for a while. I want to say Witcher 3 is another one of those big ones that has either no load screens or very minimal load screens. So again, it is going to depend a lot on how the developers themselves want to implement it. That's not to say that Sony's not going to help them implement that and provide them the tools necessary to do that. And of course, the hardware is going to help in some cases, but a lot of that is going to depend on what they can preload into the memory, what can be preloaded into cache, and how big those maps are and exactly what sort of thing they're preloading. A lot of times, like with Bethesda games in general, Skyrim in particular, we know that those tend to have some fairly lengthy load screens depending on areas that you're going into. But again, those aren't necessarily a bad thing. And I think with the SSDs, they're going to feel faster regardless of whether they're there or not. So, these are one of the things I agree. I think there's the technology is there to help implement that. I think a lot of that's in place already. I think with the faster hardware, you're going to feel that it's going to be quicker whether they're there or not. So I don't know that it's huge news, but again, it'll be interesting to see exactly how much of this comes to light when we actually see the console come out and what the developers are doing to support it.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of Blizzard is often, with a lot of their games, you can play it while it's loading or updating, because you'll see on Battle.net, it'll be zipping along and it gets to a certain level where it says, okay, it's playable now, but we're still going to be loading. And a lot of that is you get stuff like where you want to go ahead and start on the campaign, go ahead, just don't touch the multiplayer yet until it's done, or vice versa. And it's funny, I think back to my days working at Monolith and Sierra, and you would get these people that would come out, and this is, of course, before the consoles really caught up to, you used to have your console games and you had your PC games. And if a game was offered on console that was on PC, you would obviously have quite a bit of a step down in terms of graphics and playability, and eventually, right around the PS3, I think, and maybe to the later stages, the PS2, it kind of caught up and was offering a very similar experience in terms of look and feel. But I remember how people would look at these things, and you would see these things like, I got this video card, and I got this much RAM in my system, and I've got this much PC, and I've got this much space on the hard drive, and this is more than you're ever going to need. I can run every single thing that's out today, and I can do it in max settings. And they fail to forget the future, where they could say, yeah, you could take any game that is on the market right now and you can run circles around it. Let's talk about what's going to be out in 2 to 3 years, because software companies regularly, just look at Steam. They're always having these little surveys coming up going, hey, can we randomly check your hardware and submit it, because they wanted to see what was the big thing. Let's remember, I think, what was it, as little as 6-7 months ago, it was determined that the average gamer had a 1060 video card. Well, I don't know if that's the case anymore, because people are on the 2070s, they're on the 2080s. There are some other options. There are some of the 1070s and the 1080s have come down in price. Things change, and of course, as the hardware goes up, look at the stuff we saw at E3. I think we can agree that a lot of that's coming in 2020. That will strain the hardware that was standard in 2018. And if it won't strain it, I think at the very least people will get to a point where they're saying, I can still run it, it still looks good. But developers are always going to be looking for a way to say, what more can we squeeze out of the existing hardware platforms? What more can we do to make it faster, to make it a bigger game, to make it, especially now with digital. I mean, it used to be the running joke was Well, it had to make sure it fit on a floppy disk, and then it had to make sure that it fit on a 3.5-inch disk, or at least a reasonable amount. And then, as we talked about, Justin, remember how many disks Rage 1 was on? And then and now it was so big, it was like, what was it, 7 or 8 disks that they mailed it out to the press ahead of time just so we could do the load process. Even when it was done, we still couldn't log in and play it because the servers and everything weren't online. They just wanted us to make sure that we had the thing loaded up so the moment they went online, it was ready to go. Now with digital, you don't have that. It's basically, oh, you want 40 gigs? It's 40 gigs. You want 60 gigs? It's 60 gigs. We're going to keep making them as large as we need to until people say, hey, I can't do this. And the argument is always, well, storage is reasonable enough. If you need more space, just go out and get it. And I think that's kind of something that they've got to be careful of, because it's very easy to say, we will have no load screens. And then to, quote the average thing, some developer's going to say, hold my beer. And then in 2 years down the road, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they're going to hand a game that's going to stretch the limits of that current technology. Just like, The Last of Us 1 pretty much was pushing the limits of what the PS3 could do, to the point where when the PS4 came out, it was not that long after it launched where they said, hey, here's a PS4 edition of the game. So, always interesting to see that game between developers and hardware, where they developers are never going to be satisfied. I saw this one article a year ago where some guy, I think it was someone out of Nintendo, essentially said, I can't wait for the day that the hardware platforms are capped so developers don't have to worry about it. And my attitude is, what part of the technology tree have you been watching that hardware is ever capped? People are always trying to find ways faster, more, bigger, more powerful. And then, of course, driving the price down as well to make it more accessible. And that, of course, just stimulates more growth because, oh, what can we do now? So moving on, guys, let's talk about the Borderlands 2 DLC. Michael, why don't you tell us about what's going on with that? And tell us about a special thing for people who may not have the game currently installed right now.
Yeah, so one of the things that we saw announced at E3 this year, outside of being able to play the Borderlands 3 demo itself, was that they announced new Borderlands 2 DLC, which had to have come as a shock to a lot of people because, like myself, I played Borderlands 2 on the 360, and I know a lot of other people who have played it on PS3, and they had played it, on the PC, but had long since removed it. And what this is supposed to do is kind of bridge the gap between Borderlands 2 and introduce players to what's coming in Borderlands 3. So some of the features they're going to add, there's new end bosses. They're adding a new level cap to it. They're adding new monsters, new maps, that sort of thing, and it's all free, which is great. But for a lot of us who had played it a long time ago, me several years ago, we probably hadn't kept our saves or hadn't kept our characters past this point. So one of the things they are doing with this is they're allowing you to go ahead and create a brand new level 30 character so that you can actually go and experience the DLC without having to find your old save games or have to replay Borderlands 2. Now, I've got a couple of friends who still play Borderlands 2 regularly, so this is good for them to have that extra opportunity to kind of add to that experience and get the new DLC and continue to play it until Borderlands 3 comes out. But for me personally, since I don't know if I even have it on my Xbox 360 anymore, and I'd probably play it on PC at this point anyways, it'd be good to be able to start with a high enough characters so I can at least experience the DLC without having to get there in the first place. But again, it's free. It's always good to get free content to games. I'm never going to complain about that. And they obviously thought about the folks who hadn't played it for a while by allowing them to create new characters. So I think all in all, it's a really good opportunity for folks to go back and play some Borderlands 2 and refamiliarize themselves with the controls before Borderlands 3 comes out.
And Justin, your take on this, please.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty cool idea. I actually kind of dig this quite a lot just because, a lot of times games, when they make a big sequel, then they want to kind of present some story material that sets it up and kind of bridges the gap from the last game to the next game. They usually release like some sort of supplemental material, like a comic book or some sort of short video or something, where they want to set up some of the things that are going to happen in the next game. But I think this is actually a rather neat idea just because, they haven't touched Borderlands 2 in a while. The the game has basically been done for quite some time. And this gets people back into the game, kind of gets back into the mechanics of Borderlands and gets them playing, and gives them a little bit of new content story-wise to set up the new game. It's also very good at their kind of presenting the option that you can start it with a level 30 character. That way you don't have to play the entire game over again. But I believe the game is account-based, so I'd have to kind of log in and see if my character is still there. I don't know if they have... if you haven't played in a long enough time, they delete your character or whatever. But, it's definitely something I'm interested in, just because, I do want to play Borderlands 3, and this sort of hits that Borderlands fix while I wait for Borderlands 3, gets me back into Borderlands 2, which, is a great game. And it is a good way to deliver that story content that will set up the next one. And it's all free, so that's also great as well.
Yeah, it's free through July 8th. And of course, one of the great things about it is, like you said, it is so good to be able to get the bridge to the other game. I have played all through Borderlands 2, Borderlands, the pre-sequel, the DLC, but I had never completed the original Borderlands properly. I got hung up on an area and I couldn't get through it. So, of course, I've been in the process of finishing that to, be all up to speed. And this is a fantastic thing. And like you, if I don't, people think Borderlands 2 was the last game. It wasn't. Borderlands, the pre-sequel, was the last game, not counting the Borderlands 2 VR on the PlayStation. And so, between all the DLC and such, and then, when Borderlands, the pre-sequel came out, eventually there was a transition from that Borderlands 2. We all thought all the DLC and everything was done for that. So it just naturally made sense for a lot of people to transition over to the new game, pre-sequel. And so this is a fantastic thing. It allows people to go back and experience the game and get a bridge to what's happening, because people will sit there and say, oh, I remember Handsome Jack, and I remember this, and I remember this. I remember going into the vault, but, sometimes you get a little hazy with, okay, did this happen in the pre-sequel? Did this happen in Borderlands 2? Did this happen in Borderlands 1? Now, most of us can remember that. Some people can't, and it's very nice to have the option to go back. And like you said, how could you argue with the price? That is absolutely fantastic. And anytime you can get more Borderlands, especially for free, that's just a win-win in my book. So moving on, guys, we had some news coming out of, well, I shouldn't say coming out of, but associated with San Diego Comic-Con, which is coming up in the not-too-distant future. And this basically also ties into Disney's D23 Expo. Now, I did a radio segment on this last Friday on KSWFM, so I'm going to let you guys basically take the start of it. So, Justin, why don't you start us off and give us a little bit about what's supposedly going on at Comic-Con that fans should be excited over, on top of all the great stuff they already have?
Well, I think the big news, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the big news is that Marvel will be there this time, which they weren't there last year.
Correct.
So I think that's the big headline that I saw, which is, that's going to be a big deal just because, as we all know, we have pretty much next to no information on Phase 4, other than I think they started to open up a little bit about the Black Widow movie. But Phase 4 is obviously going to be very interesting just because now that Phase 3 is over, the first 3 phases were basically the Thanos story arc. So now that that's over, they have to kind of start from scratch and start to, build up something else story-related for the next ostensibly giant story arc that's going to basically be the next several phases. So hopefully at Comic-Con we get some titles for some of the next movies that are coming out the next year or so, because we basically know nothing. After Spider-Man, we don't really know what's coming after that. My thoughts are we'll probably get some information on the next Black Panther movie. But beyond that, I think everything else is sort of up in the air. So that's going to be very exciting. I'm not 100% sure who else is showing up at San Diego Comic-Con this year, but I know that Marvel was the big one that people were kind of speculating whether they would show up just because they weren't there last year.
Right. And and that's the thing, because people had been saying well, what's the big deal? Of course they're coming. That was known. And my take on it was, well, up until recently, there was a lot of outlets speculating that with the D23 Expo coming in August, that they were going to save their big reveals for that. And that, while obviously Marvel would have some kind of presence at the con, as they do in terms of the comic book booth, the merchandise and stuff like that, when we say they are not going to be at the con, we're specifically referring to the Marvel theatrical universe not having their big Hall H presentation. And what happened was a lot of Avengers Endgame artwork apparently started going up in the last week or so around the Gaslamp district. And this got everyone talking about, okay, it looks like Marvel's not only going to be here, they're going to have a big push. And like I said, there are people on Reddit that say, well, what's the big deal? It was always planned. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of consternation, especially when Warner Brothers said they were not planning on doing a Hall H panel. There was a lot of hand-wringing from some of the naysayers saying, oh my God, no Marvel, no Warner Brothers on Saturday and Hall H, what are they going to do? Well, supposedly that's a very different story now. Michael, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, so, it'll be my first chance to go to SDCC, so I'm excited about that. But Disney's has done kind of odd things with their announcements before. Like at CinemaCon, Disney will bring, previews of what's coming to the theaters. Like, for example, this past CinemaCon, we got to see the first 17 minutes of Toy Story 4. But they never bring stars. They never really make announcements. They never really show off a lot at CinemaCon. A lot of that kind of comes out at D23, which makes sense. I mean, that's their big expo. That's where they're trying to drive a lot of their own push to get, all things Disney out there. So the fact that there's a big push for Marvel at SDCC tells me that they are looking to expand not only what they're going to show at D23, but also kind of hit the broader audience for SDCC. And I think that's a good place to hit it, because I think when it comes to the Marvel franchise itself, I think they miss out on a lot of folks who are not quote unquote Disney fans, right? They're not Disney looking to go to D23 Expo. They're not really into the Disney scene as much as they are the Marvel comic book scene. And I think this, with the new Phase 4 coming out, with the new movies that we haven't seen much of, I think this is a really good opportunity to gauge the excitement of the crowd, gauge the interest of folks who are not, again, strictly there for the Disney experience, and also kind of get a feel for how their announcements are going to be taken by the general comic loving fans in general. So I think it makes sense that they should be doing something at SDCC to kind of build up that excitement for the next phase. Again, there's been a lot of talk about people getting a little bit worn out now with so many comic book movies on the market. Is there some of that fatigue setting in? And I think this is a good way to kind of fuel that excitement, because I think ultimately the Disney fans will keep it going well. But I think if you really want to push these comic book themed movies and really drive that with the broader audiences, that you have to really put that presence at a place where they're all congregating. SDCC being one of the biggest, obviously, in the world, for them to do that. So I think it makes sense that they're going to be there. What's that mean for the future of what they're going to show at SDCC after this? Who knows? It kind of falls back on some of the E3 stuff as well, where, Sony and EA sitting it out. But now with the new consoles coming out next year, we suspect that they couldn't, because, again, they want to fuel that excitement for the new consoles. I think with the Marvel Universe, they kind of need to do that again. I think people are coming off that high of Endgame. They've kind of, been waiting several years in the making of getting there. People are kind of like, are we ready to start that investment again? Are we ready to really recommit to new characters? Are we ready to recommit to the series, the franchise as a whole? So I think this is a good opportunity for them to kind of fuel that excitement. So I think it's a wise decision that they are there, and that they make a big push for the next phase of the movies.
It's so funny because it is such an interesting, I always keep attributing it to a chess game, because I look back to past D23 Expos, and I remember one, I think it was the second one we ever attended ourselves. And the one previous 2 years before, that was when we got our first look at Avengers. They had most of the cast out there. We had the scene of, Loki in his cage on the ship. They had, pretty much all but 4 or 5 of the cast, and they explained that those that weren't there were basically filming, so they couldn't get away. And that came right near the end, and it was phenomenal to see them out there. And then I think back to the show a couple years after that, where they came out on stage, and we got to see a clip from Thor: The Dark World. And I believe, I'm going to obviously miss some people in the mix, but Natalie Portman was there. Some of the other stars were there. Sir Anthony Hopkins was there. And then, that was just for Thor: The Dark World. And then they showed a clip that had not been, seen anywhere. And then, of course, as it moved on, I remember they went to Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That was also the show where we found out that the next Avengers movie was going to be called The Age of Ultron. None of that stuff had come out at Comic-Con, which had just been a few weeks before. They came out and they brought Chris Evans out. They brought Anthony Mackie out, and I forgot who the other person was, but they all came out on stage. They showed the elevator fight scene, but before they did that, they came out and they said, okay, folks, we're going to show you a scene that we literally had just filmed the week before. And we still have temporary special effects and stuff in it. And it was the freighter fight scene from the opening of the film. That was the accessibility you get at the D23 Expo that you don't get anywhere else. And that, of course, we also were followed that up with, we got an intro for Guardians of the Galaxy. And nobody had seen anything from that before. That was the bit where they brought them all out. And John C. Reilly standing there reading off who they are on their rap sheets as they're all sitting there at the police lineup and of course, we got the thing with Hooked on a Feeling, and it's like, wow, these guys are a bunch of idiots. This looks fantastic. I can't wait to see more. And that was the great thing about it. And I they've also had situations where I remember a few years back, everybody said, okay, this is when they're going to announce the Phase 3 films. And then out of the blue, they went and did their own little event in LA and just said, here are the Phase 3 films. We're going to talk more about these later. Thank you. Bye. And it's like, okay, that was completely random and unexpected. So a lot of us have been trying to play the game of what we're going to get. Now, we sit here and we play the game of saying, okay, we know there's going to be another Guardians of the Galaxy. We're pretty sure there's going to be another Black Panther and another Doctor Strange film. We pretty much think we're going to get another Ant-Man and the Wasp film. We've heard about the Black Widow standalone film. We've heard about, I can never get the name right, I think it's Shang-Chi that they're working on. We've heard rumors that there's going to be new Avengers films, but with different incarnation. And then, of course, you have all the rumors about, well, what's going to happen with the fact that Marvel now has Fantastic Four, X-Men, Deadpool back in the mix. And of course, we're told, well, those will be down the road somewhere and do that. But see, the great thing about it is the speculation's rampant. They were at WonderCon pretty heavily with their animated shows. Okay, that's kind of what you'd expect. So I think, truthfully, the key is going to be Spider-Man Far From Home. Because if you look at it, I know it's a Sony production, but let's not forget, it's done in production with Marvel. We've heard Tom Hardy's coming back for Venom 2. That's kind of a no-brainer. He was expected to because he's under a multi-picture deal. So we get Spider-Man Far From Home, which we understand will deal with the events after Avengers Endgame. It wraps up Phase 3. Obviously, I would think you might get a post-end credit, which is going to set things up. And I think this is the game. They're going to drop some kind of hammer because we did not have any end credit scene in the Avengers Endgame. Now, I know they're re-releasing it with supposedly an end credit scene and all of that, but the whole point is, look at the grand picture. They're putting Avengers out with additional footage, a Stan Lee tribute, and a rumored credit scene. So then you get Spider-Man Far From Home. And wonder what that Endgame scene is going to be wrapping up Phase 3. So everybody's talking, all the buzz is out there. A couple weeks later, Comic-Con happens. All eyes are on Comic-Con. What is Marvel going to do? What are they going to announce? Well, the popular belief is they could take it very safe and say, Black Widow. We know it's filming. Here's Scarlett Johansson, folks, and here's the sizzle reel. There you go. And that would be probably plenty to get people excited. Would they be courageous enough to, aside from that, say, oh, by the way, we're going to announce blah, blah, blah. But that's it. They're not coming out here. They're not it. We're just going to show a few titles and logos. Get all the people talking, all the rage. And then a month later, here we are at the D23 Expo. This is our own thing. This is our showcase where we will talk about all of our films coming in the next couple of years. Everybody's still buzzing about, are they going to bring the Fox franchises to bear at this event? Are they going to bring Fox News at San Diego Comic-Con? We don't know. And then you get to play the game of, oh yeah, let's not forget the Disney Plus streaming service, which you expect them to be ramping up like crazy and promoting, because guess what? There are Marvel shows there, just like there are Marvel shows coming on the Disney-owned Hulu, and these things are all going to start setting up. So I think it's safe to say that you're going to get a few reveals and some teases at Comic-Con, but I think they're going to drop it all down at the D23 Expo. And I think it might be, you know, Black Widow, great example. Here it is, here's a sizzle reel. But then when you get to the D23 Expo, now we're going to go even further behind scenes, and we're going to actually show you some scenes that weren't at the convention. So I think, you know, these guys know their marketing. I think they're definitely going to have some fantastic stuff for us at each of them. Okay, guys, moving on. Star Wars Celebration coming into Anaheim in 2020, August 2020. Tickets already went on sale. Tickets already sold. The Saturday apparently sold out. The 4-day passes sold out in just a few hours. I've heard that they're, if not completely sold out, they're very lightly sparse amounts of tickets remaining for a show that's still 13 and a half months away. Press can't even apply for their passes yet. So let's start with you, Michael. Last Jedi had a negative backlash by some. Solo took the brunt of some of that. The recent Star Wars Celebration was, I think, by all accounts, a large success. Are you surprised that people had this kind of reaction, especially when it is assumed there will not be a new movie in 2020 for them to look forward to a reveal on?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you always hear a lot of, well, we hear the backlash from the select group, right? I think it's always blown up bigger than it really is. But, you know, they always say about how we don't want no Star Wars things. We're kind of, you know, fatigued on Star Wars, yada, yada. We hear all this online from the naysayers. And yet they announced that Star Wars Celebration is going to be in Anaheim. They go on sale and boom, they sell out the first day, right?
Yep.
So obviously there's clearly enough excitement to drive that, whether there's films coming or not. And maybe it's because there's been so little said about what is coming in the works. I know we've heard lots of rumors. I know we've heard lots of ideas and theories about, you know, what's the next trilogy going to be, who's going to be working on it. We've seen the stuff kind of come and go. But I think it does speak to the fact that the fans are still pretty lively and very interested in the Star Wars universe as a whole. Do I think it helps that it's in Anaheim? Absolutely. I think besides the Disney Star Wars Galaxy Edge opening up, I think you've got some renewed excitement in Star Wars as a whole because of that. We know that the Disney live streaming service is coming. They're going to have some live action Star Wars stuff coming with that. And with the new movie, I think it's starting to generate a lot more buzz and excitement than we've had in a while. So I'm a little surprised that it sold out as quickly as it did based on what we have heard in the past. But I think it says a lot to the fans. It says a lot to the fan base of the ones who really want Star Wars to succeed. And it kind of pushes aside some of those who are, I don't know, more negative about the franchise. I think it just shows that there really is still quite a bit of excitement behind Star Wars and what they could do with that franchise. So I'm personally excited to see, you know, what is going to be coming from that franchise down the road. Once the last movie is out for the Skywalker series, how do we move forward? You know, maybe the excitement's around the fact that there's talk about the Old Republic type movies coming out. Obviously, new characters that aren't going to be featured, that they're not going to have to worry about tying into the current trilogy or the current 6 movies, I guess, 8 movies at this point, and allowing those new characters to kind of start their own bonds and form their own movies. So I think it says a lot for those kinds of things, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of thing they're introducing at it for this coming year or 2020.
And Justin, your take, please.
Yeah, so I think quite a bit of the excitement, at least for me, is just the fact that this is going to be a D23 that's a post episode 9 expo, just because, you
mean a Star Wars celebration?
Sorry.
No problem.
Star Wars celebration. This is going to be a Star Wars celebration post episode 9. Because like the last one, obviously we were expecting episode 9 related, because that was the next big one that we were waiting for. So now that the Skywalker saga is basically over, the numbered episodes are pretty much done. It's basically like a clean slate. We don't know what Disney is planning for the next. Well, we do. We do know some of the things they're planning. We know Rian Johnson. We had heard that he's working on a trilogy of his own, and then the Game of Thrones creators are also working on a series of films that have some rumors about them as to when they take place and all that. But we don't really have a lot of details as to what the direction of the franchise is going to be after this. For a while, it seemed like their plan was to kind of do a Marvel type thing where they have Star Wars movies every year, and it was going to be on even years. It was going to be episodes like 7, 8, and 9, and then on the odd years, it was going to be some sort of like something like Solo or a Rogue One or something like that. So now that that's kind of over, it seems like they were kind of reevaluating their strategy, and we're going to kind of get some insight as to what their new direction is going to be for this franchise. And I think that's awfully exciting. As a lifelong Star Wars fan, I'm honestly a little bit more excited to see what kind of unique take that they or unique direction they take this franchise. Now that they sort of have a clean slate, we're not really looking forward to any specific movie. Now we can basically look forward to entirely original content. So that excites me quite a bit. So I think that's probably quite a bit of what's generating a lot of the hype for this event.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's you got the fantastic location of Anaheim with a very good facility. Not that the facilities around the country that they've gone to in the past, around the world actually with London, haven't been fantastic. But you have a situation where you've got Anaheim. There's going to be so many people that are going to say, we're right here, Galaxy's Edge is across the street, we got to go. The second attraction will definitely be up and running by that time, we're told. So that's, really exciting. And then you have the reputation. They have had a reputation in the recent years as this is the place that you go for the reveals. This is where we got the first look at 7. This is where we got the first look at 8, episode 8. And this is where we got our first look at episode 9. This is where we got some behind the scenes details on some of the other things. I remember going to the last one in Anaheim, and we got an upcoming look at episodes of the Clone Wars. We got the premiere episode of season 2 of Star Wars Rebels, as well as a cast interview. And there was a lot of other fantastic stuff, including an extremely elaborate dealer room. And the great thing about it is it's building the reputation that even when there wasn't a pending movie for them to push, there was still fantastic content to have, to see the props, to see the displays and the photo opportunities. And the panels were fantastic. Look at last year. We had the episode 9 reveal. We had the Mandalorian panel. We had the fantastic throwback and reveal panels. And we also had Jedi Fallen Order getting its reveal. That game is getting some very good buzz. So now we have excitement around the video game aspect. We look at the live action series. We all know The Mandalorian's coming, but there's also a Cassian Andor series. Now, we don't know when it's going to come, but if it's not immediately out of the chute, that is probably going to be something that's going to be very heavily pushed at that show. We know that the upcoming episodes of the Clone Wars are coming, but we don't know what's happening with Star Wars Resistance. We don't know about other new animated shows. We know content is coming. And so that's the beauty of it. And as you both have said, there's also some new movies coming. And I think the beauty of that is people are going to basically say, if we don't hear about it by then, there's going to be rumors. But I think we can safely say that in August of 2020, we could at least start getting some confirmations as to what is coming in 2021, 2022, 2023, even though they've talked about, having a bit more of a gap between the films, and some say, well, it might be more of a heavier on the live action with a bit of a gap. The point is, people know they're going to get something, and whatever news is coming, they're going to get the first look, the big reveals, they're going to get the access to the stars, and they're excited because they know that the future's bright, despite all the doom and gloom. It's kind of like the old, the Simpsons bit where they did the parody of Cosmic Wars, and it was supposed to parody the Phantom Menace. And a comic book guy comes out and he goes, "Worst Cosmic Wars ever. I will only see it 5 more times today," and he gets right back in line to watch it again. And it's that kind of mentality of, oh, I'm going to gripe about it all the time. I kind of get a laugh like the people who used to gripe about how, oh, I hate Call of Duty, it's terrible, no one buys the thing, only kids play it. And you're like, well, it's the top selling. Well, yeah, it stinks. And then you find out that they not only have a PC version, they have the PlayStation 4 version, or before that, the Xbox version. And you would say, well, I thought you said this thing stinks. Why'd you get it? Well, I got the console version so I could get the maps first on DLC because they come out 30 days before the PC. But I thought you said it stinks. Well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I had it. And, and I think you get a lot of that. You get people that think it's fashionable to go online and bash Star Wars, but guess what? Who do you think are the first ones in line buying tickets when they can? So it'd be very interesting to see. They always do a great job with it, and I'm looking forward to when the press applications go online so we can get in and get everything all confirmed with that. Well, guys, we covered a lot of news this week, a lot of stuff going on, and next week we'll be back with some even more stuff. So until then, folks, have a very safe week. Enjoy your summer, and we'll talk to you then.